Hello everyone, if you've been here before, welcome, and if you're new, my name is Janet. I'm working through the King James's Bible. Today I'm in the Book of Kings and I'm working through chapters 9 and 10 today. So if you're ready, we shall get started. And as we start chapter 9, we begin with the prophet Elisha. Now he's calling forth one of his young prophets to go on a mission for him. What he wants him to do is go to Ramoth Gilead, take a box of oil with him, and meet up with the man Jehu. Now he is the commander of chariots for the king of Israel. Now when he gets there, what he wants him to do is get his attention and then take him to a private chamber, and in there he wants him to anoint him as king of Israel. Once he's done that, he must flee the area quickly and leave. So this young prophet sets off on his mission, and he gets to Ramoth Gilead and he sees Jehu there with a group of men around him. And he says, I need to speak to Jehu. So Jehu gets up, he says, I have something private to announce to you. So he takes him into a chamber and he pours this oil over his head and he declares him king of Israel. And he says, the house of Ahab, all are going to die, and his wife Jezebel is going to be eaten by dogs. And then he flees and leaves the area. Now when Jehu comes out of this chamber, the men around him are like, well, what was that all about? Because obviously they've seen this young prophet just run and now he's covered in oil. They're like, was he a madman? And Jehu says, he's just pronounced me king of Israel. And they're like, wow. And they take off their jackets, drop them to the floor, and then they blow the trumpets and they hail him king of Israel. So Jehu, now as the king, sets off on his mission to claim his throne. He goes to find the two kings of Israel right now, which is King Joram and King Ahaziah. Now King Joram is basically in recovery because he's been to war with the king of Syria and he's been wounded. And King Ahaz is there just visiting him. So they're both there together when Jehu approaches. Now the security surrounding these two kings are forced and bullied into joining Jehu's team. And the two kings then come out on their chariots. And they come out and there's Jehu on his chariot. And they say, have you come here in peace? And Jehu says, you, two kings, have been worshipping false gods. You've been doing all these sinful things. It's like, no, I've not come in peace. So they quickly turn to run away. And Jehu gets his bow and arrow out and he shoots the first king, King Joram. Now King Joram is the king of Israel, whereas King Ahaz is the king of the Judah tribes. So now that King Joram is dead, he sends his men to get him and they just throw him into the field. And this field is the field or the vineyard that used to be owned by Naboth that basically King Ahab had stolen with Jezebel, remember? Don't know if you've read that story, but his predecessor, King Ahab, which was one of the wickedest kings of Israel, he basically murdered Naboth to steal his vineyard and take it on to make a vegetable garden. So this king now has been killed by Jehu and he is basically thrown into this field and left. So Jehu then pursues the second king, King Ahaziah, and he kills him too. And his body is taken back to Judah because he followed the Lord more. So they bury him, they give him a proper burial. So Jezebel is next on Jehu's hit list. And he sets off towards her palace. Now she's heard that he has already killed these two kings. And when he arrives, she's got herself all ready. She shouts out to Jehu from the top of her palace, you're a murderer, you're just like Zimri. Now Zimri was the king of Israel that only lasted for 7 days. He'd again killed a king to take on his role as king and the people didn't want him, so he ended up killing himself. So she's saying that he's the same as Zimri. Now Jehu shouts up to the servants surrounding Jezebel and he's sort of saying to them like, are you on my side or her side? And a lot of them basically are on Jehu's side because she is a wicked woman. So they get her and they throw her out of the palace at this top floor and she falls to the ground and is killed. And just as God had predicted, the dogs eat her body and there's only parts of her left. Jehu then declares that God's prophecy has been fulfilled, and this closes chapter 9. But unfortunately, as we open chapter 10, the bloodbath does not stop. Jehu is on more missions to kill more of the Ahab household, because that's his mission, to clean them out. So in Samaria, there are 70 sons belonging to the house of Ahab. So Jehu has his men go out there and kill all of them, behead them, and put their heads in baskets around the city. And that's exactly what they do. He tells the people, Jehu, that Elijah, this is what he'd prophesied by the Lord, that all of the household of Ahab had to die. Can you imagine the fear now of those who are in any connection with Ahab? They must have been like panicking because their lives are now numbered. So Jehu goes on to kill all of Ahab's officials. They're all murdered, massacred. Plus the priests that worked for Ahab and any of his close friends, they were all killed too. Jehu then goes to Samaria himself, and he meets with 42 of Ahaziah's, which is the king of Judah, his relatives, and he kills all of them too. Next, Jehu has a deceptive plan. He's going to get rid of all the Baal, false god worshippers. So he tells the people of Samaria that he's going to have this sacrifice for Baal. That's what he says. So he says to all the prophets, bring forth your prophets of Baal, come hither, kind of thing. So they all come thinking there's going to be this whole sacrifice to their god, which is who they believe in. And as he's making this burnt offering, he's already informed his men that they are to kill everyone. Nobody is to escape, because if they do let anyone escape, then they'll be killed themselves. So that fear enough will make them carry out their duty. So these prophets come to the temple of Baal. He then starts this burnt offering, and then the massacre starts. They are all killed. The temple is demolished and everything in it as well. So he completely wipes out all of the false god worshipping of Baal. So now that that is all done, Jehu gets a good message from the Lord saying that he has done good by getting rid of the whole house of Ahab. And for this, God is going to then make Jehu's descendants reign over Israel for 4 generations. However, we note that Jehu is not always following all of God's laws. He actually is a bit like Jeroboam, who basically made those 2 golden calves, one in Bethel, one in Dan. He's worshipping those as well. So he's sinning. He's not totally pure to God. And we note over time that God began to reduce in number the Israel community. Obviously, there's a lot in there that are sinning. So the king of Syria, he ends up taking over the Reuben tribe and the Manasseh tribe and the Gad tribe. So they are overpowered now by the king of Syria, Hazael. Jehu then dies after reigning over Israel for 28 years. So he is the one king. We've always had 2 separating those tribes. He's been the one now that's ruled for the 28 years, and he is buried in Samaria. Then his son Jehoahaz becomes the new king of Israel, and this closes chapter 10 today. So it's been a very murderous couple of chapters there. Jehu has destroyed all of Ahab's families, anybody associated with him, in his official camp, also his friends, the priests, like nobody got to survive, wiped out them totally. He's reigned for 28 years, his son now takes over, so we will find out in the upcoming chapters how this new king does, looking after Israel, and whether that king of Syria is going to move further into the tribes and overpower more. Let us find out as we continue on the journey within the book of the King James Bible. Thanks for watching. Bye.